we know we've been hearing a lot about Russia's relationship with Europe and just how deep its energy sector is with Europe and how that relationship is that's a very difficult relationship to break economically for Europe. Although Europe is doing everything it can, everything you've described, it made me think about how throughout this crisis, Europe with through because of the dominance of the U.S. and just listening to whatever the U.S. said was actually going way above and beyond what the U.S. would commit to in terms of Russia and how economically they would wage this kind of warfare. But China and Russia, I mean, Russia, of course, with its energy and its natural resources, but China, I think, in a more broad kind of portfolio, has so much to offer to Europe. Do you think that this will succeed, this attempt to isolate because Europe, it sounds like, I mean, it has been going the road of austerity for many, many, many years, but this seems like such a huge step in that direction that Europe could look very much like the United States very soon. Do you see this working given how China has so much to offer? It already has a lot of countries in Europe, maybe not the biggest of the clients like the UK, for example, but a lot of European countries have big relationships with China. Even the UK does, despite all of the nonsense, all of the new Cold War stuff. What do you think? Do you think this will work in
There's
the long
one
term?
trap that futurists tend to fall into, and that's imagining that countries are going to act in their self-interest. This is what the mistake Stalin made with Hitler. He thought if Germany attacks Russia in World War II, it's obviously going to lose. No sane country would attack Russia in just as winter's coming, but Hitler attacked Russia, much to the surprise. You'd think that if you tried to say, what is a logical future? Let's go back to the 1991 when the Soviet Union self-dissolved into parts. The whole idea, the dream at that point was Russia's leaders thought, well, if now that we can have peace, we're not going to have a war budget anymore. Europe is going to invest in us and help us rebuild a rationalized, efficient industry, and we will trade with Europe, and we'll both get rich on mutual trade. Well, this terrified the United States. It said, "Oh my, we Americans want to be the beneficiaries of Russia. We don't want to trade with it. We want to carve it up and privatize it." And take over and basically have Wall Street take over its oil resources, its gas resources, its nickel resources, its electric utilities. The last thing America wanted was this symbiotic mutual gain between Europe and Russia. And I think that Putin and most of the leaders at that time expected that Europe would act in its self-interest and they could both end up gaining. But that's not what happened. Obviously, Europe followed American dictates and continues to, because its leaders follow. Its leaders are really just like Zelensky in Ukraine. They're just as dependent on what the State Department dictates to them to do as Zelensky is, and there's something evangelistic about it. The Europeans I've spoken to really, and the English also, really believe that America is the land of the future, and that neoliberalism, that finance capitalism somehow is going to be an ideal of private enterprise. They've bought the rat poison. They've eaten the rat poison, and they actually believe it, and they think of themselves not simply as servants of the United States, following what it's doing, or as the Pakistan former prime minister said a few weeks ago, slaves of the United States policy. They actually are evangelistic promoters of neoliberalism, and as sort of disciples or just bishops, you could say, really like a religion. And they treat the American-centered neoliberalism as the new religion, and for them, it's literally a crusade against Russia and Europe. And I think this has shocked Putin and I would imagine the Chinese leadership also, thinking, how can Europe be so completely unrealistic. And how can its media lie so constantly about what's really happening in Ukraine? How can Europe deify the neo-Nazis in Ukraine as freedom fighters, as heroes, as wonderful people to be supportive? I think this has been such a shock to the Russian leadership that they realize finally that well, Europe is not going to act in its self-interest. There's not going to be any mutual gain. Europe again and again is just going to grab any money that we have there, like they've grabbed
Yeah.
our whatever was in European or American banks. There's really nothing we can do. So there's been a fundamental reorganization uh, with with Russia and the rest of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, meaning not only with China, but with Iran, with India, with all of the other Eurasian countries. So in that sense, the United States has brought about exactly what it feared. The whole rest of the world going its own way, productively, in a capital investment way, raising living standards, things that democracy are supposed to do. Well, in the United States, we really don't have democracy because the political parties are controlled by the donor class, the 1%. That's what the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling meant. And the United States is left to without any means of self-support, and Europe will be left without any means of self-support. At some point, Europe may say, gee, we made a mistake. Maybe we should have tried to profit from Russia because everybody else is profiting with getting Russian gas and nickel, and China and other countries are rebuilding Russian industry. And we could have had our car industry build up Russia, but we don't have a car industry anymore because it doesn't have the gas that it needs and the raw materials and titanium it needs from Russia. So now we've seen other countries replace us. And so Europe has been rendered pretty much obsolete. And even if it says we made a mistake, let's be friends again, I don't think Russia or other countries will trust it, mainly because they can afford not to trust it. They say, why take a risk with
Yeah.
trusting that Europe somehow may not just continue to be America's poodle? Why take a risk? Why not just, we're doing just fine the way we are. Why not just work with each other peacefully? And all that the United States can do about this is threaten to bomb it. And the way to stay away from this threat is simply to say, look, you go your way, we'll go our way, and to have enough of a military between them to defend themselves against the American potential military attack. That despite the almost 800 military bases the United States have, if the United States is not getting foreign exchange from these countries anymore, the dollar with the euro and the yen and the sterling will all go way down against the Eurasian currency bloc. And they're going to move into a common bloc with their own counterpart to the IMF, their own counterpart to the World Bank, their own trade organization, and the world will be split into two parts, just like the world split when the Roman Empire fell apart and the East went forward, Western Europe went down. This is really the final submergence of Western Europe.